the storm cellar. Can you hear that thunder rolling overhead? The rain is hammering down out there, but you're safe here with me in the warmth and the dark. Tonight I have 4 true stories from night shift security guards who walked away from their jobs and never looked back. You'll hear about the thing that crawled between floors where nothing should exist, the cameras that revealed someone was already inside, the elevator that kept stopping at a floor that was never built, and the knocking that came from behind a basement door that had been sealed for decades. These are the stories they tried to forget, the shifts that changed them. So settle in, let the rain wash over you, and listen closely. I took the security job at the Hartwell building because nobody else wanted it. 12 stories of empty offices, abandoned 3 years ago when the company moved overseas. My job was simple. Walk the floors twice a night, check the doors, make sure the homeless hadn't broken in again. The building was set for demolition in 6 months. Until then, I was its only occupant from midnight to 8 a.m. The first 2 weeks were easy. I'd start at the top floor and work my way down, flashlight cutting through the dark. The power was off except for the emergency lights in the stairwells, so I moved through darkness most of the time. Cubicles still held family photos. Coffee mugs sat on desks. It was like everyone had simply vanished mid-workday. I developed a rhythm. Each floor took about 15 minutes. I'd check the bathrooms, the conference rooms, the supply closets, then down the stairs to the next level. By my 3rd week, I could do it half asleep. I'd finish both rounds by 6 a.m. and spend the last 2 hours in the ground floor security office, reading paperbacks by lamplight. That's when I started hearing the sounds in the ceiling. The first time I was on the 4th floor. A sharp metallic pop echoed through the darkness. The sound of ductwork expanding or contracting. Old buildings do that. I'd heard it before in other places. But then it happened again and again. A rhythm to it. Pop, silence, pop, pop, like footsteps on sheet metal. I stood still, flashlight pointed at the drop ceiling tiles. The sound moved across the ceiling from east to west, following the main ventilation shaft. Then it stopped directly above me. The silence that followed felt heavy, expectant. I counted to 60 in my head, waiting. Nothing. I moved to the stairwell and continued my rounds, but something had shifted in the building. The silence felt different now, like it was listening. The next night I heard it again. Same floor, same location. The metallic popping moved through the ductwork above me, but this time it was faster, more deliberate. I tracked it with my flashlight, watching the ceiling tiles, but they never moved. Whatever was up there wasn't heavy enough to disturb them, or it was being careful. I knew about the crawl space. Every commercial building has them. The gap between the drop ceiling and the actual floor above, where they run the ventilation ducts and electrical conduits. Maybe 18 inches of clearance. Enough room for maintenance workers to shimmy through if they had to, but barely. On my 4th night, I brought a ladder from the janitor's closet. I set it up on the 4th floor, in the center of the main corridor where the sounds had been loudest. My hands shook as I climbed. The drop ceiling was just acoustic tiles resting on a metal grid, easy to move aside. I pushed one up and slid it over, creating a 2-foot opening into the crawl space above. Darkness, complete and total. My flashlight beam cut through a forest of metal ducts and hanging wires. The space was cramped exactly as I'd expected. I could see maybe 15 feet before the beam dissolved into black. The air smelled like dust and old insulation. Nothing moved. I was about to climb down when I heard it. A soft scraping sound, deeper in the crawl space, metal against metal. Something shifting its weight. My throat went dry. I angled the flashlight toward the sound, but the ducts blocked my view. The scraping came again, closer this time. Whatever was making it was moving toward me. I should have climbed down. Every instinct screamed at me to move, to get away from that opening. But I stayed frozen on the ladder, flashlight trembling in my grip, waiting to see what would emerge from behind those ducts. The scraping stopped. Then I saw it. Just for a moment, a shape moving between the pipes. Too large. That was my first thought. Too large to fit in that space. The crawl space was 18 inches high, maybe less. But this thing was bigger, contorted somehow, folding itself around the obstacles. I caught a glimpse of something pale and elongated, moving with a horrible fluidity that made my stomach turn. It saw my light. I know it did, because it stopped. And in that frozen moment, I understood that it had been waiting for someone to open that ceiling, waiting for an invitation. It started moving toward me, fast now, no longer cautious. The ducts popped and groaned under its weight. I could hear it breathing, or something like breathing. A wet, rattling sound that echoed through the metal passages. I dropped the flashlight. It clattered against the ladder and fell, throwing wild shadows across the walls. I didn't wait to see where it landed. I jumped from the fourth rung, hit the floor hard, and ran. Behind me, I heard something drop from the ceiling opening. Something heavy hitting the floor with a wet thump. I didn't look back. I ran for the stairwell, taking the stairs 3 at a time, not stopping until I burst through the ground floor exit into the parking lot. My car was 50 yards away. I made it in 10 seconds. I sat in my locked car until sunrise, watching the building. Nothing moved in the windows. Nothing emerged from the doors. When my shift supervisor called at 8:15 asking why I hadn't checked in, I told him I quit. He asked why. I hung up. I drove past the Hartwell building one last time on my way home. In the fourth-floor windows, I thought I saw something pressed against the glass. Something too tall to be standing on the floor. Something that had found a way down from the crawl space. I never went back to confirm it. Some things are better left in the dark, in the spaces between floors where they belong. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear that metallic popping sound, and I wonder if it's still looking for me. The retail store closed at 9, but my shift didn't start until 11. 2 hours for the managers to count registers, lock up, and set the alarm. By the time I arrived, the place was always empty. Just me, 40 security cameras, and 3 floors of high-end clothing displays. The security office was windowless, tucked behind the stockroom on the ground floor. 16 monitors covered the wall in front of my desk, each screen split into 4 camera feeds, 64 different angles of the same empty store. I'd watch them cycle through, sipping coffee, checking my watch. Most nights, nothing happened. A mouse in the shoe department once. A mannequin that fell over on its own. That was it. The monitors hummed. That was the sound I remember most. A constant electrical drone that filled the small room. After a few hours, you stopped noticing it. It became part of the silence. I'd been working there for 6 weeks when I saw the figure. It was just after 2 a.m. I was doing my routine scan of the monitors, letting my eyes drift across the feeds. Camera 12 showed the women's section on the third floor, racks of dresses and a display platform where they positioned mannequins in seasonal outfits. 5 mannequins stood there now, arranged in a semicircle, all facing the same direction. Except one of them was wrong. I leaned closer to the monitor. The image was grainy, black and white, but I could see it clearly enough. The figure on the left wasn't quite like the others. The posture was different, too natural. The head was angled slightly, not locked in that artificial mannequin pose. And the proportions seemed off, too tall, too narrow through the shoulders. I stared at it for a full minute. It didn't move. Maybe I was imagining things. The cameras were old, the resolution poor. Maybe it was just a new mannequin the day shift had positioned differently. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I rewound the footage, watching the previous hour on fast forward. The display platform remained unchanged. The 5 figures stood in their semicircle, motionless. I checked the entrance logs. No one had entered the building since the managers left at 10:30. All doors were sealed. All motion sensors were active. I switched to camera 13, which showed the same area from a different angle. The 5 mannequins looked normal from this view. I switched back to camera 12. There it was again, that figure on the left, standing just slightly wrong. My coffee had gone cold. I set it down and rubbed my eyes. The monitor hum seemed louder now, pressing against my ears. I needed to do a floor check anyway. Standard procedure every 2 hours, walk all 3 levels, test the emergency exits, make sure everything was secure. I grabbed my flashlight and key ring and left the security office. The store felt different at night. During the day, it was all bright lights and music and crowds. At night, it was a maze of shadows. The emergency lighting gave off a dim greenish glow. My flashlight beam cut through the aisles as I made my way to the escalator. The 3rd floor was silent. I swept my light across the clothing racks, the checkout counters, the fitting rooms. Everything was exactly as it should be. I approached the women's section slowly, my footsteps echoing on the tile. The mannequin display platform was ahead. I could see the 5 figures arranged in their semicircle, perfectly still. I counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All accounted for. All clearly mannequins, plastic skin, blank eyes, frozen poses. I circled the platform, checking each one. Nothing unusual, nothing out of place. Just 5 store mannequins wearing this season's collection. I felt ridiculous. Too much coffee, too many quiet nights watching grainy monitors. I headed back to the security office, taking the stairs this time, checking each floor as I descended. When I sat back down at my desk, I immediately looked at monitor 12. The figure was back. My stomach dropped. It stood in the same position, left side of the semicircle, head angled slightly, proportions wrong. But now it was facing a different direction. It was facing the camera. I felt ice spread through my chest. I'd just been up there. 30 seconds ago. The platform had been empty except for the 5 mannequins. I'd counted them. I'd walked around them. I switched to camera 13. From that angle, I could only see 4 mannequins. I switched back to 12. 5 figures. The one on the left staring directly at the lens. My hands were shaking. I rewound the footage, watching the last 10 minutes. The display stayed the same. 5 figures in a semicircle. Then, at exactly the moment I would have been entering the security office, the figure on the left turned. Slowly, deliberately, until it faced the camera. I couldn't look away from the monitor. The figure didn't move now. It just stood there, perfectly still, staring at the camera, staring at me through 60 feet of ceiling and floor and empty air. The other mannequins remained unchanged, but this one, this thing, was watching. I reached for the phone to call the police, but stopped. What would I say? That I saw something on a monitor that wasn't there when I checked in person? That a mannequin turned its head? The monitor flickered, just for a second. When the image stabilized, the figure was closer to the camera. Not by much, maybe a foot. But it had moved. I stood up so fast my chair fell backward. I didn't pick it up. I grabbed my keys and walked out of the security office, through the stock room, out the employee entrance. I sat in my car with the doors locked until sunrise. I called in sick the next day, and the day after that. When I finally went back to collect my last paycheck, I asked the day manager if they'd reviewed the security footage from that night. She said the system had malfunctioned. All recordings from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. were corrupted, just static. I never asked what they found on the third floor. I didn't want to know if the mannequins were still arranged in a semicircle, or if they'd found one missing. The Meridian Tower was 40 stories of steel and glass, brand new when I started working there. The kind of building that looked impressive in daylight, all chrome and sharp angles, but felt wrong at night. Too clean, too empty. My job was simple. Monitor the lobby desk, watch the security feeds, and make sure the 4 elevators returned to the ground floor by morning. The building had been occupied for 3 weeks. Most floors were still empty, waiting for tenants to move in. During the day, construction crews finished the interior work. At night, it was just me and the hum of the HVAC system. I noticed the problem with Elevator 2 on my 4th shift. The elevators had a display panel at my desk showing which floors they were on. Elevators 1, 3, and 4 stayed parked on the ground floor where I'd left them, but Elevator 2 kept moving. I'd watch the digital number climb, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, then descend again, up and down all night long, stopping at different floors with no one inside. I checked the maintenance logs, no scheduled work, no automatic cleaning cycles. The elevator just moved on its own, following some pattern I couldn't understand. The building manager told me it was a software glitch. The system was still being calibrated. He'd have someone look at it next week. Until then, just ignore it. But I couldn't ignore it, because Elevator 2 kept stopping at the 13th floor. That shouldn't have been possible. The Meridian Tower didn't have a 13th floor. It went straight from 12 to 14, a common superstition in commercial real estate. I'd checked the directory, I'd walked the stairwells. 12th floor, then 14th, no 13th. Yet the display panel clearly showed 13. On my 7th night, I decided to see for myself. I waited until Elevator 2 descended to the lobby, then stepped inside before the doors could close. The control panel was standard. Buttons for floors 1 through 40, skipping 13. Just empty space where that button should be. I pressed 12 and felt the elevator lurch upward. The machinery hummed around me. Cables groaned overhead. The small metal box felt suddenly claustrophobic, like a coffin being hauled upward through the building's spine. I watched the floor indicator above the door. 3, 5, 7, 9. At floor 12, the elevator stopped. The doors opened onto a typical office level. Drop ceiling, gray carpet, cubicle walls still wrapped in plastic. Emergency lights cast everything in dim red. I stepped out, looked around, then got back in. I pressed 14. The elevator climbed. I felt it rise, heard the cables pulling. But then something changed. The movement became wrong, too slow, like the elevator was struggling. The lights flickered, and the mechanism made a sound I'd never heard before. A grinding, scraping noise that set my teeth on edge. The elevator stopped. The floor indicator showed 13. The doors opened. I stood frozen, staring into darkness. Not an office floor, not anything finished. Just raw concrete, support pillars stretching into shadow, exposed rebar, construction debris scattered across an unfinished floor. The emergency lights didn't reach here. My view extended maybe 10 feet before dissolving into complete black. Cold air rolled into the elevator, not the recycled chill of air conditioning. This was damp, earth smell cold, like a basement that had never seen sunlight. I reached for the door close button, but my hand stopped, because I heard something in that darkness. A phone ringing, not a cell phone, an old landline, the kind with an actual bell inside. It rang in steady intervals, somewhere deep in that unfinished floor, past the pillars and the darkness. Ring, silence. Ring, silence, patient, waiting. The elevator doors started to close, then stopped. They shuddered and opened again, wider this time, as if inviting me out. The phone kept ringing. I should have pressed the button, should have gone back to the lobby. But something about that ringing pulled at me. It sounded important, urgent, like someone desperately needed me to answer. I stepped out of the elevator. The concrete was rough under my shoes. I moved forward slowly, one hand trailing along a support pillar, the other reaching into the dark. The phone rang louder now, closer. I could almost pinpoint its location, maybe 30 feet ahead, near the north wall. Behind me, I heard the elevator doors close. The sound echoed across the empty floor. Then the machinery whirred, cables pulling, gears turning. The elevator was leaving. I spun around and ran. My footsteps slapped against concrete as I crashed through the darkness, hands outstretched, searching for the elevator doors. But I'd lost my bearings. The pillars all looked the same. The darkness pressed in from every side. The phone stopped ringing. In the sudden silence, I heard something else. Movement. Not footsteps. Something dragging across the concrete, slow and deliberate, somewhere in the dark behind me. Getting closer. I found the elevator doors by touch, cold metal under my palms. I pounded on them, searching for a call button, but there was nothing, just smooth wall. The floor indicator above showed the elevator descending. 11, 9, 7. The dragging sound stopped. Whatever was in the darkness with me had stopped moving. I pressed my back against the doors and waited, listened. The silence felt alive, breathing, watching. I couldn't see anything, but I knew something was there, standing just beyond my vision, waiting to see what I would do. The elevator returned. I heard it rising. 5, 7, 9, 11. The machinery groaned, the cables strained. Floor 13 lit up on the indicator. The doors opened behind me. I fell backward into the elevator, scrambled to my feet, and punched the lobby button. The doors closed. Through the narrowing gap, I saw the darkness of that impossible floor, and for just a moment I thought I saw something standing among the pillars. Something tall, something that had been waiting there a long time. The elevator descended. When the doors opened on the lobby, I walked straight to my car and drove home. I sent my resignation email before dawn. I never learned what floor 13 really was, or why the phone was ringing, or what answered when someone finally picked up. The Norwich State Hospital campus had been closed for 15 years, but someone still needed to watch it. That someone was me. 3 basement levels beneath the old salmon building, checking boilers and sump pumps, making sure the pipes didn't freeze in winter. The pay was decent, and I didn't mind the isolation. Most nights I sat in the maintenance office reading, listening to water drip through ancient pipes. The basement was a maze of tunnels connecting different sections of the campus, narrow corridors with peeling paint and exposed wiring. Some areas were still used for storage: old hospital beds, filing cabinets, equipment that nobody wanted to pay to remove. Other sections had been sealed off decades ago when they renovated upstairs. The deepest tunnel ended at a fire door, heavy iron, institutional gray. With no handle on my side, someone had welded it shut years before I started working there. I'd asked my supervisor about it once. He said it led to the old hydrotherapy rooms, condemned after a flood in the 80s. Everything beyond that door was concrete and black mold. Not worth salvaging. I'd walk down there twice a shift, checking the pressure gauges on the pipes that ran along the tunnel walls. The air was always damp, smelling of rust and something organic I couldn't identify. Fungus, maybe. Or just decades of accumulated moisture seeping through the Connecticut foundation. The door never bothered me. It was just there, at the end of the tunnel, covered in chipped paint and oxidized metal. A dead end. Nothing more. Then the storm came. It started around midnight, wind hammering the brick buildings above. Rain coming down in sheets. I was in the maintenance office when the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then everything went dark. The emergency lighting kicked in after a few seconds. Dim red bulbs spaced every 20 feet, casting the basement tunnels in a bloody glow. I grabbed my flashlight and headed out to check the backup generator. Standard procedure during power outages. The generator was in the lowest level, past the storage area, down the tunnel that ended at the sealed door. I'd walked that route 100 times, but tonight felt different. The air was heavier. The dripping water sounded louder, echoing off the concrete walls with an irregular rhythm that set my nerves on edge. I was halfway down the tunnel when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, deliberate impacts, metal on metal, coming from ahead of me where the tunnel ended. I stopped walking, listened. The dripping water continued its irregular patter. Wind howled somewhere above, muffled by tons of concrete and earth. But underneath those sounds, I heard it again. Knock. Knock, knock. It was coming from the sealed door. My flashlight beam cut through the red emergency lighting as I moved forward. The tunnel narrowed here, pipes running low overhead, forcing me to duck slightly. Water had pooled on the floor, more than usual. It soaked through my shoes as I approached the door. The knocking continued. Slow, patient, like someone testing the door's strength. Like someone checking if anyone was listening on the other side. I stood 10 feet from the door, flashlight trained on the rust-covered surface. The emergency light above cast everything in crimson. The knocking stopped. I should have turned around, should have gone back to the office and called my supervisor. But I needed to understand. The door had been welded shut for decades. There was nothing beyond it except flooded rooms and structural damage. Nothing that could knock. I stepped closer. The door was solid, 2 inches of iron with industrial welds running along the frame. I reached out and pressed my palm against the cold metal. The door vibrated, just slightly. A tremor that ran through the iron and into my hand. Then the knocking started again, but different now, faster, more urgent, and louder, much louder than before. Bang, bang, bang. Something was hitting the door from the other side, something heavy. The impacts sent vibrations through the floor, rattling the pipes overhead. I stumbled backward, my flashlight jerking wildly. The door shook with each impact. Rust flaked off the welds, drifting down like snow. I could see the metal flexing, bending slightly inward with each blow. Whatever was on the other side was strong, getting stronger. The pounding became frantic. Bang, 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 bang. No rhythm now, just desperate, furious impacts. The welds started to crack, thin lines appearing in the rust, spreading like spider webs, decades-old metal giving way under impossible pressure. I heard something else then, underneath the pounding, a sound like breathing, wet and ragged, coming through the gaps around the door frame, and beneath that another sound, multiple sounds, like dozens of things moving in the flooded darkness beyond the door, scraping, dragging, converging on the barrier that separated them from me. One of the welds split. A gap appeared near the top of the door, maybe half an inch wide. The pounding stopped. In the sudden silence, I heard water rushing. Not dripping, rushing, like something had opened a floodgate. Then something pressed against the gap, something pale and wet, trying to squeeze through. I ran. My footsteps splashed through the pooling water as I sprinted down the tunnel. Behind me, I heard metal screaming, welds tearing, the door giving way. Water exploded into the corridor with a sound like thunder. I didn't look back. I just ran, taking corners blind, climbing stairs 2 at a time, not stopping until I burst through the ground-level exit into the parking lot. The storm was still raging. Rain soaked me in seconds. I made it to my car and sat there, engine running, watching the annex entrance. Water poured from the basement exits, black water, smelling of decay and things that had been sealed away for a good reason. I quit the next morning. They asked why. I told them about the flood, the broken door, the water damage. I didn't mention what I'd heard, or what I'd seen trying to push through that gap. The hospital hired a crew to pump out the basement. They found the door completely destroyed, welds sheared off, the iron bent outward. The maintenance supervisor said it was structural failure, metal fatigue, decades of water pressure finally winning. But I know what I heard, and sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. That patient knocking, testing, waiting, wondering if I'll answer. The storm is passing now. Can you hear it? The thunder's growing distant, the rain softening to a gentle patter on the cellar roof. You're safe here. You've always been safe here. If these stories found you in the darkness tonight, leave a like so others can find their way here too. Subscribe, and you'll always have a place to shelter when the storms come. And if you have a story of your own, something that happened on a night shift, something you can't explain, whisper it in the comments below. I'll be listening. Until next time, stay safe in the storm.